Lose the weight. Gain it back. Lose it again. Gain it back. If you've been through this cycle even once, you know how soul-crushing it is. You start strong. You follow the rules. You watch the number on the scale finally move in the right direction. And for a while, you let yourself believe that this time is different. Tamara Loving went through this for decades. She would lose the weight. She would feel hopeful, even proud. And then, slowly, inevitably, the weight would come back. Sometimes it brought a few extra pounds along with it. She did this not once, not twice, but roughly 10 times over the better part of 20 years. Until the day it didn't. At 45, Tamara Loving finally broke the cycle for good. And the reason why has almost nothing to do with what you'd expect. It has nothing to do with a new diet, a new supplement, or more discipline. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what changed for her and how you can use that same shift, no matter how many times you've tried and failed before. What is yo-yo dieting? Before we get into Tamara's story, let's talk about the phenomenon that trapped her for so many years, yo-yo dieting. Yo-yo dieting, also called weight cycling, is the pattern of losing weight, regaining it, and then dieting again. It is one of the most common experiences in the world of weight loss, and it affects tens of millions of people, across every age, every background, every body type. Research shows that the vast majority of people who lose weight through dieting regain it within 3 to 5 years. Many gain back more than they lost. Some studies put the number of people who regain within a year alone as high as 80%. Read that again. This isn't a rare outcome. For most people who go on a traditional diet, regaining the weight isn't the exception, it's the expected result. And yet, when it happens, almost everyone blames themselves. They think, I just didn't try hard enough. I need more willpower next time. This isn't a character flaw. It's a predictable biological and psychological response to restriction-based dieting. When you severely restrict calories, your body responds by slowing your metabolism, increasing hunger hormones like ghrelin, and intensifying cravings for the exact foods you're trying to avoid. Your brain is, quite literally, working against your diet. Breaking this cycle doesn't require more willpower. It requires a completely different approach. And that's exactly what Tamara Loving eventually discovered, after nearly 2 decades of getting it wrong. Why diets set you up to fail. To understand what finally worked for Tamara, we first need to understand why the things she tried before didn't. Most diets are built around a single idea, restriction. Eat less of this. Cut out that. Follow this plan exactly, for a fixed number of weeks, and you'll get the result you want. And for a while, restriction works. That's the trap. Short-term, almost any diet produces short-term results, because almost any structured eating plan creates a calorie deficit. The scale moves. You feel motivated. You tell your friends this is the one that finally clicked. But restriction-based diets share one fatal design flaw: they have an end date. There's a day when the meal plan is over, when the 6-week challenge ends, when you finally reach your goal weight. And the moment that structure disappears, so does the thing that was creating your results. There's also a psychological cost to restriction that most programs never talk about. When you tell yourself a food is completely off limits, that food becomes more tempting, not less. Psychologists call this the deprivation effect. The more forbidden something feels, the louder it calls to you until, eventually, most people break, overeat the very thing they were avoiding, and then spiral into guilt. That guilt is often the real reason people abandon a diet completely, not just a single meal. One slice of pizza becomes, I already ruined it, might as well eat the whole thing. One skipped workout becomes a skipped week. All or nothing thinking turns a small stumble into a total collapse. Tamara experienced this pattern more times than she could count. Every single diet she tried was, in its own way, a countdown. And every countdown eventually reached 0. What she needed wasn't a better countdown. She needed something with no end date at all. There's one more piece to this that rarely gets said out loud: the diet industry doesn't actually need you to succeed long term. A program that worked permanently would only ever need one customer. A program that produces short-term results and long-term regain, on the other hand, produces repeat customers for decades. That's not necessarily malicious on the part of any individual coach or company, but it is the structural incentive baked into an industry built around restriction. Tamara's story, decades of trying. Tamara Loving spent the better part of 2 decades in this cycle. She tried it all. Low-carb plans. Low-fat plans. Meal replacement shakes. Structured programs with strict rules and rigid timelines. She documented much of her journey through today's Start Today program, sharing candidly how she had been through the process more times than she could comfortably count. Some sources point to roughly 10 distinct rounds of losing and regaining significant weight. Each attempt started with hope. Each one ended with frustration. She would find something that worked. The scale would move. Her clothes would fit differently. Friends would comment on how great she looked. And for a moment, she would feel, finally, like she had cracked the code, like this time, she had figured out the secret that had eluded her for years. And then something would happen. A stressful life event. A holiday season stacked with family dinners and old traditions. A period of exhaustion where cooking felt impossible and takeout felt like survival. And the structure, the meal plan, the tracking, the rules, would quietly crumble. The weight would return. Sometimes slowly, over months. Sometimes it seemed to come back faster than it left. Each time this happened, something else was lost too, a little more trust in herself, a little more belief that lasting change was even possible for her specifically. That's one of the cruelest parts of yo-yo dieting. It doesn't just cost you physically. It chips away at your confidence, cycle after cycle, until you start to wonder if you're simply not the kind of person who can do this. By the time she reached 45, Tamara had one more attempt ahead of her. But this time, something in her had shifted before she'd even started. She deeply knew that if she did the same thing again, the same way, she would get the same result. Another temporary win. Another eventual collapse. She had to do something different. Not a different diet. A different approach entirely. What was different this time? What Tamara did differently wasn't about the food. It wasn't about the exercise. Not at first, anyway. It was about understanding why she had failed every time before, not the surface-level reasons, but the real ones. She dug into the emotional side of her relationship with food. She asked hard questions. What triggers her eating? What was she using food to cope with? What was the emotional need sitting underneath the behavior, the one no meal plan had ever addressed? Because here's the truth that most diet programs don't talk about: eating is almost never just about hunger. For Tamara, as for so many people, food had become tied to comfort after a hard day, to stress relief during overwhelming weeks, to reward after accomplishing something, to numbing difficult emotions she didn't have another outlet for. Food had quietly become a tool for managing feelings, not just a source of fuel. And no amount of meal planning would ever solve those underlying patterns. You can hand someone a perfect grocery list and a flawless workout schedule, but if stress still sends them straight to the pantry at 9 at night, the plan was never going to hold. She had to change her relationship with food at the root level. Not just what she ate, but why she reached for it in the first place. That question, the why, became the foundation for everything that came after. The mindset shift that changed everything. The mindset shift Tamara made was this: she stopped treating weight loss as a destination and started treating it as a way of life. She stopped thinking, I need to reach this goal, and then I can go back to normal. Because that going back to normal was exactly what had reversed her progress every single time before. Normal was the problem. Normal was the version of eating and living that had led to the weight gain in the first place. Instead, she committed to small, sustainable habits that she could genuinely imagine doing for the rest of her life. Not a 6-week sprint. Not a 30-day challenge. Not a program with a finish line at all. A new normal. One built to last, not one built to be survived until the goal was reached. She also stopped measuring success purely in pounds. She started paying attention to energy levels throughout the day, to sleep quality at night, to how strong she felt climbing a flight of stairs, to how her clothes fit at the waist and the shoulders. Non-scale victories, as fitness professionals call them, became just as meaningful to her as the number itself, sometimes more so. This shift sounds simple. It sounds almost too simple to matter. But it is profound, because it removes the all-or-nothing thinking that causes most diets to fail. A bad meal no longer derailed the entire week. It was just a meal. One data point in a life made up of thousands of them, not a verdict on her character or her willpower. She also gave herself something most diet culture never offers: permission. Permission to have an off day. Permission to enjoy a celebration without spiraling into guilt. Permission to be human, inside a plan flexible enough to bend without breaking. That flexibility is precisely what all her previous attempts had lacked. Rigid plans don't bend, they snap. And once they snap, most people don't know how to pick the pieces back up. Tamara built something that could flex under pressure and still hold its shape. The physical changes. With her mindset fundamentally shifted, Tamara made changes to her eating and movement habits that felt manageable rather than punishing. She focused on eating more whole foods, vegetables, lean proteins, healthy fats, foods that kept her fuller for longer and gave her steady energy instead of sugar crashes. She didn't eliminate any food group entirely. She didn't obsess over counting every calorie down to the last gram. She simply crowded out the less nourishing foods by filling her life with more of the good ones. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should. Crowding out is gentler than cutting out. It asks, what can I add, instead of what must I take away? And that single reframe removes a huge amount of the friction that makes diets feel like punishment. She found movement she enjoyed, not movement she dreaded. For her, that meant walking outside, some light strength training, activities that fit into her actual life rather than a fantasy version of it. Because the only workout you'll sustain long-term is one you don't hate doing. And she was patient. Genuinely, deliberately patient. She gave herself permission to lose weight slowly, sometimes barely noticing progress week to week. Because she knew this time that the slower and more sustainable the loss, the more likely it was to actually last. That patience was, in many ways, the hardest part. Slow progress doesn't feel exciting. It doesn't give you a dramatic before and after in 6 weeks. But it also doesn't come with the same crash on the other side. Tamara traded the thrill of fast results for the security of results that stayed. Maintaining the results. And this time? The results lasted. Tamara Loving broke the cycle. She lost the weight, and she kept it off because she had built a life that supported her new body, rather than a diet she would eventually abandon. This is the difference between transformation and a temporary fix. A diet is something you follow until it ends. A lifestyle is something you simply live. The weight stays gone when the habits that produced it stay in place, quietly, in the background, without needing daily willpower to enforce them. Tamara wasn't white-knuckling her way through maintenance. She wasn't counting down the days until she could relax. This had become, simply, how she lived, the same way brushing her teeth or getting dressed in the morning had become automatic, not a battle she had to win over and over again. How to break your own cycle. If you see yourself in Tamara's story, if you have been through the yo-yo cycle more times than you want to admit, here is what her journey teaches us. First, stop looking for the perfect diet. There isn't one. There has never been one, and there never will be. What matters is finding an approach you can sustain when life is hard, not just when it's convenient, when you're stressed, when you're traveling, when your schedule falls apart. If a plan only works on your best days, it isn't really a plan. Second, explore the emotional layer. What does food do for you, beyond nutrition? Does it soothe you after a hard conversation? Reward you after a long day? Fill a quiet moment that feels uncomfortable otherwise? Answering that question honestly is more powerful than any meal plan you could download or buy. Third, redefine success. A pound a week of sustainable loss beats 10 pounds in a month that comes right back in 2. Slow is not failure. Slow is lasting. And lasting is the entire goal, not the speed of the first few weeks, but where you are standing 3 years from now. Fourth, be kind to yourself when you slip. Slipping is part of the process. Every single person who has ever succeeded at lasting change has slipped along the way. What matters is that you return to your habits the very next meal, not that you were perfect for the whole plan. Perfection was never actually the requirement. Consistency was. Fifth, and this one Tamara would tell you is easy to overlook, give yourself permission to let go of normal. If your old normal is what led to the cycle in the first place, going back to it was never the finish line. Building a new normal is. Tamara Loving spent decades in the cycle. 10 times, by some counts, she lost weight and watched it return. She got out. At 45, after nearly 20 years of trying, she finally broke free, not with a stricter diet, but with a fundamentally different relationship with food, with her body, and with herself. So can you. It doesn't matter how many times you've tried before. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck in the cycle. What matters is the next choice you make, and the one after that, and the thousands of small, sustainable choices that quietly add up to a life that doesn't require you to start over again. One last thing worth remembering, Tamara's turning point didn't arrive as a single dramatic moment. It wasn't one morning where everything suddenly made sense. It was a slow accumulation of honest questions, small experiments, and a growing willingness to let go of what wasn't working even after it had worked for a little while. If you're in the middle of your own cycle right now, that's worth holding on to. The breakthrough rarely looks like a lightning bolt. More often, it looks like this: one more honest attempt, approached a little differently than the last one. Please like and subscribe for more real transformation stories every week. And share this with someone who's been through the cycle. They need to know it can end.